There were times when my jaw practically hit the floor while playing Cruis'n Blast, and those moments often happened within minutes, if not seconds of each other. Clearly the developer, Raw Thrills, knows a thing or two about their namesake. Now, in case you missed the train on the Cruis'n series, Cruis'n Blast originally released to arcades back in 2017, and was essentially the first proper new entry this series has had in nearly 20 years. At least if you ignore the GBA exclusive Cruis'n Velocity, which you should, as well as a Fast and Furious arcade game that was rethemed to just Cruis'n on Nintendo Wii, which you also should ignore. Whether it's racing through London while dodging an out-of-control Ferris wheel, or narrowly avoiding repeated encounters with a giant Yeti by slamming through a wall of ice, or weaving around giant tornadoes as they rip apart scenery right in front of your very eyes. Cruis'n Blast is a never-ending cascade of incredible set pieces that makes for one of the most thrilling racing experiences I've ever had. Especially when you can do so as a fire truck or a unicorn or a freaking dinosaur. I could easily provide a couple dozen examples of moments that push my heart rate up to the red line, but so much of what makes a game a joy to play is the surprise of it all. But is there enough gameplay there for when the surprises inevitably run out? Let's find out. As always, Cruis'n Blast is all about a series of point-to-point races that span a variety of locations around the world. This time including London, Madagascar, Singapore, Rio de Janeiro, and more. The core mechanics are essentially unchanged from the rest of the series, where it's all about pulling off cool-looking stunts like flipping over cars, barrel rolling off jumps, and now even drifting around corners in order to earn an instant speed boost and try to pull ahead of the pack. But this time you also have access to at least 3 blasts per race, which will give you an extended burst of speed. And you can buy even more of them if you want before starting a cup. Aside from the boost feature, Cruis'n Blast can essentially be played using just a single button across any controller. Hold gas to go, tap it while turning to initiate a drift, and double tap to perform a wheelie. It's stupid simple, and is far less towering than stomping on the gas pedal repeatedly in the arcade. Although you do have the option to use R instead in order to initiate stunts if you'd prefer to keep your thumb on the gas at all times. There technically is a brake too, but you'll never need it. There's even a Mario Kart-like auto-accelerate option available in the pause menu, along with a motion control toggle for steering, which mostly works fine, but I found the input slightly slower than just using a control stick, which is what I ended up using the vast majority of the time. Beyond the new boost feature, what truly separates Cruis'n Blast from the previous entries in the series are the absolutely chaotic track designs that make even Mario Kart look more like Mario NASCAR. Nearly every race is a pulse-pounding thrill ride full of wonder and spectacle, and wouldn't feel out of place at, say, Disney World, only now without the 3-hour wait. And hey, the Yeti actually works here. Heyo! All 5 of the original arcade tracks return here, along with 19 new ones exclusive to the Switch version, making for 24 total. They're split up between 6 different circuits, each themed to something like escape sequences, stormy weather, or an alien invasion. By and large, the new tracks fit in well alongside the arcade originals, making for a largely seamless experience, even if the arcade tracks are still among the best. Unfortunately, a handful of the new tracks, being 1 per circuit, are noticeably shorter than the others, ending in just under a minute as compared to a minute and a half or 2 for the others, which not only feels premature but also unsatisfactory, like a story ending just before the climax. The finish line can easily sneak up on you in these cases, which is especially annoying because it's difficult to know when to time your boosts, which are often critical during the final segment. Now, not every track is entirely unique, as you'll see many of the same locations pop up throughout, even featuring some reused track segments and set pieces shared between them. It's a fun surprise when the semi-truck breaks apart the first time, but it's a little less exciting when you see it again a few cups later. Some locations start to become overly familiar in the back half of the game, particularly as they're sometimes paired with increasingly gimmicky cup themes like helicopters or a UFO invasion, which are inherently more repetitive and limited than the broader themes and more inventive set pieces found in the front half of the game. Now, even though the arcade tracks are back, and even given their own arcade spot on the menu, they aren't quite perfect one-to-one recreations. While the overall track design does appear to be nearly identical, some elements have either gone missing entirely or were relocated to other tracks. Like how the dinosaurs in Madagascar have gone the way of the dinosaur and are nowhere to be seen. But there is now an entire dinosaur cup, which I suppose makes up for it, but it's a shame that had to come at the expense of that original track. There have been a few other changes too. The checkpoint system is gone entirely, which does make sense that it existed primarily to E-quarters, but the option to retain it in the arcade mode would have been nice. The arcade's sporadic driver commentary is also missing in action.
Hold on! Yeah!
but that isn't exactly a big loss, and it was largely superfluous. Perhaps the biggest difference is the graphical downgrade, because even though I still think it looks pretty great on Switch in a slightly dated sort of way, I did notice some definite downgrades when comparing the two head to head, like less impressive particle effects such as when racing through dirt, along with reduced lighting and water effects. And then there are missing details, like the passengers that used to hang off the cars in Madagascar, or the livestock that once littered the racetrack that could be turned into instant roadkill. Now, to be fair, I didn't notice most of these details until I went back and looked for them. But it is a little disappointing that these 5 tracks aren't closer to being arcade perfect, especially since there's an entire section dedicated to them on the main menu featuring the arcade cabinet and all. On the upside, the game's entire presentation hits all the right nostalgic pleasure centers of my brain. From the cheesy but supremely catchy theme song that blasts on the main menu, to the simple and clean interface that wastes no time in getting you into the action, as well as just even the overall style. Engines scream as you tear around the racetrack, perhaps even a little too loudly at times, as the volume control would have been nice. And it all runs at a mostly steady 60 frames per second, with periodic mild dips, but it's never anything too dramatic. In the heat of the moment, the overall art direction can be pretty stunning, though a closer inspection will reveal some low polygon models, blurry textures, and occasionally rough animations. But when you're flying by at 150 miles per hour, it's hard to notice or much care. The game's car physics can also feel a little, shall we say, wonky at times, but that's almost part of Cruisn's charm at this point. There are plenty of unlockables here to hold your interest, like over 20 different vehicles to obtain, but doing so requires finding 3 keys scattered around every track, which you can then trade in for the cars you want. Now, given the limited movement options inherent to Cruis'n games, tracking down most of the keys isn't especially difficult, though a few do require some special maneuvers, and I generally enjoy the process, but I'm a sucker for collectibles when the rewards are fun, which they definitely are in this case. Furthermore, beyond the ability to repaint your car, or unicorn as the case may be, each vehicle can be leveled up by winning races, which not only improves its stats, but also provides access to further customizations that you can purchase, like decals, a bigger engine, a body kit, and even neon lighting. And you'd better believe it works on the dinosaur too. Look, Cruis'n Blast is not a deep game. Hell, that's arguably a big reason for its appeal, as it's accessible to almost anyone, both through its simple controls but also its simple gameplay. Partially because the game doesn't really believe in punishment. You don't have to worry about wrecking your car as it's invincible, although you can destroy the CPU racers, which is awesome, nor do you need to worry about veering off course, as invisible walls ensure that you stay on the track. Heck, you can't even turn around. This game is one way only. True to its arcade roots, Cruis'n Blast is entirely focused on offering a spectacle and making sure you're having a good time. Perhaps to a fault. The overall gameplay is fairly shallow, with most races being determined in the final few seconds, often coming down to a well-timed boost. Beyond managing that boost and performing as many stunts as you can, there isn't a whole lot else to the core racing experience. And for the most part, that's okay, because it's still a lot of fun and Cruis'n Blast puts on one hell of a show. But over time, I began to realize that while it is like a show, it's more like a magic show, in that it presents an amazing illusion that tricks a player into thinking they're in danger, when they almost never are. There's no fear of being sucked up by a tornado or being run over by an out-of-control Ferris wheel, as they'll always be just out of reach. But like with any good magic trick, you can still appreciate it even if you know the secret. It just might not be quite as fun as when you were being fooled. And to an extent, this applies to the multiplayer too, which supports up to 4 players at a time, either locally with multiple switches, or on the same TV with Splitscreen. Remember those days? It's great to see, and really took me back to the Cruis'n games on the Nintendo 64. But sadly, it's a little too stuck in the past as there's no online option at all, which would have been appreciated. In any case, 2-player Splitscreen runs well at around 40 frames per second with a full slate of 10 competitors, though when you add 3 or 4 players, Splitscreen is understandably reduced to just 30 frames per second. And sadly, all the computer competitors are removed too, making for a slightly lonelier, less chaotic experience. In any case, the multiplayer runs well overall and was a real blast in my experience, especially with 2 players, with nearly every race being a nail-biter up until the very last second. Seriously, we often finish within the exact same second. And as it turns out, that's mostly because of the crazy amount of rubber banding being deployed here. To the point that even cars that weren't being controlled at all, as in we physically put the controllers down, would automatically start driving themselves once another player got too far ahead. And somehow, by the end of the race, they were never far behind. Yeah! And yet, despite knowing this, I still had a lot of fun. I just wish I could dial back the rubber banding for when you want some more serious races. Look, at the end of the day, Cruis'n Blast knows exactly what it is and it isn't ashamed about it. It's a balls-to-the-wall, arcade-focused spectacle that's all about racing from point A to point B and seeing some damn cool things along the way. And even though the thrills and surprise factor may wear off before too long, it doesn't change that I had an absolute blast the first few times I experienced most of them, even if my enthusiasm did dampen slightly after discovering the truth behind some of the magic. But even with all of its faults, the lack of depth, reused track themes, a few missing elements, and way overzealous rubber banding, no other racing game has achieved the sheer level of thrills and spectacle that I experienced at Cruis'n Blast's best. So even though I probably wouldn't call Cruis'n Blast a great game, it is a pretty freaking awesome one. And sometimes that's all you need, and that's why I liked it a lot. Just turn off your brain, turn up the sound, lean forward, and enjoy the ride. Plus, hey, it's only $40 US. So there you have it, everyone, our review of Cruis'n Blast on Nintendo Switch. Are you planning on picking it up? Let us know what you think of it in the comments below. And with that, thanks for watching, and of course click that subscribe button and ring that bell if you haven't already for tons more on Cruis'n Blast and everything else Nintendo Switch. We'll catch you later. Bye everyone!